Good evening or good morning or whatever it is, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD. This is our Hoops HD podcast. We're recording here on the evening of Monday, November 22nd, a little after 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined on my sides up here by the puppet David Griggs and
Woohoo!
David Dorman. Down below me, we have Joby Fortson and Rocco Miller back from bracketeer.org. And we have got a lot to get to because I've got to tell you, Griggs, that of the entire season, other than outside of the week of March, outside of the month of March, this is probably the best week for college basketball in the entire season.
Yeah, it is. And it's actually busier than any one particular week in March. March is the most climactic, but this week or 9 days or 10 days, it's just wall to wall games. In doing the daily write-ups, if they're up a little bit later than what you're used to seeing, that's why. Like I do these by hand, and there's just a lot to get to. We might be on for 3 hours tonight.
I hope we're
It's
not
really
gone
tough
for
when you have no hands.
Yeah, and that makes it harder too. Like it's hard to write those with no hands.
I really hope that we are not on for 3 hours tonight. What I do want to do is we want to go through all the major conferences and any other news that all the major games. A lot of them are going on as we record this, actually, so we can obviously won't be able to discuss games that are not final yet, but
we're going to discuss two teams that we almost never discuss because of what's happening in the Bahamas.
Okay. Let's start things off though with let's get the screen share going here. Hopefully this worked, and we should, if we did things correctly, we should see the Big East standings on the screen. Did I do it correctly, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And I want to start off with the Big East. Rocco, let me start with you. I thought right now this is the most impressive conference in the entire country, especially after they won the Gavitt game 6-2 over the Big Ten.
I have to agree, especially out of the power leagues, Chad. I think you look at a league that if we rewatch the preseason Big East show that we all did. I think most of us had 4 bids for the Big East. Right now, there could be as many as 7 with the type of resume build that teams like Providence, Marquette, and even Xavier's win over Ohio State looks a lot better tonight. So yeah, I mean, who knows where we end up in the end, but Big East off to a tremendous start. UConn looks awesome. They haven't had their big test. That's coming later this week in the Bahamas. Hopefully they don't have any leaks on their court.
Different building, it's okay. Different building.
yes, I'm aware. The Atlantis should be okay. You look at Villanova, 2 really, really unbelievably elite level games. They end up falling short at UCLA and over the weekend against Purdue. Just a tremendous game, though. You could tell Villanova's in the elite. They belong there. You got to consider them a top 10 team still, even with the 2 losses early on. I think that's just going to make them tougher as the season goes on. And then, a team like St. John's, who took Indiana to the wire, could easily be a tournament team as well. So the league is a lot deeper than we might have thought a couple weeks ago. And they really showed it against the Big Ten.
Yeah, Joby, Villanova did have the win over Tennessee in dominating fashion. And even beyond then, let's not forget this undefeated Xavier team here as well, suddenly.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is one of, and you mentioned how out of our preseason, we probably missed on the Big East badly. And I'm one of those. I was one of those who were saying 4. Right now, it's very early, but right now, in pure metrics terms, the J&G has 7 of them, 7 teams inside the bubble. I mean, now that may not hold, et cetera, but it just goes to show the metrics that are being developed early. And it starts with the Musketeers. Taking down the Buckeyes is a great win for the conference because, this is an Ohio State team that everybody consensus before that game was top 25. And then so if the Musketeers do that, and then also double up essentially a very good Norfolk State team. Don't, just like, it's Norfolk State. No, this is actually a very good under the radar team for MEAC. Easily the best historically Black college team out there right now. Musketeers are looking very strong.
Yeah, you kind of backed up a little bit. It was a good team, a good under the radar, good MEAC team. It was Norfolk State. I mean, they did blow them out, but it would have been surprising had they not. Maybe not won by 40, but I don't think anybody thought Norfolk was going to step up on them. But what it means is that Xavier, they did beat Ohio State. And again, Ohio State, impressive win tonight against Seton Hall. I think a lot of people forget this was a team that got a 2 seed last year and everyone's back. I think the most indelible thing from last year was how the season ended against Oral Roberts and not the 30-ish games that they played before that. This is a top 10 caliber team, which says to me, Xavier might not be top 10, but they're capable of beating top 10 teams at home. And are they going to get Nova? Are they going to get some of the highly ranked teams in this conference at home this year?
If we're talking Big East also, Dorman, I got to go to you. You are in the Chicago area. And how about those 4-0 DePaul Blue Demons?
A great start. Stubblefield has this team playing good ball. We're going to see in the upcoming 2 weeks some bigger tests for DePaul, but so far so good. The Blue Demons look like they might be able to hang around in the middle of this Big East pack. And I know Seton Hall lost earlier this evening, but last week went into Ann Arbor and beat Michigan. And to me, that's probably, of any team in the country, that's the best road win I can find.
Yeah, it might be.
It might be, yeah. And here we go. We've got the upcoming schedule for this week, and it is a fascinating week. I think we already mentioned a little bit here about UConn in their event, Xavier in an event where they could be facing Memphis or Va Tech.
That's gonna be good.
So there are a lot of key games coming up this week. Providence will be playing later this evening after we record this against Northwestern, but has a shot to match up against Virginia in the championship of that game. Virginia just knocking off Georgia before we came on the air. But let me go back to Rocco here. Let's talk about the other half of the Gavitt games and maybe the most disappointing conference of the nation in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a disappointment starting at the top. For a while there, it looked like Purdue was going to lose to Villanova. They really surged late to win that. Tremendous game, as I said before, and Purdue carrying the flag for the league. You look at the Boilermakers' remaining games coming up. If they can get by Florida State at home next week, they're in really good shape to go as many as 15, 16-0. Could be one of our last undefeated teams at this point if they take care of the Noles. So keep your eye on that. But the rest of the league, we had 4 teams at the top in any given order, with Michigan also up there, Ohio State and Illinois. Now Ohio State's got their loss to Xavier. Nice win tonight, so that helps a little bit. But Michigan certainly getting beat at home by Seton Hall and then just getting absolutely destroyed in Vegas last night against Arizona leaves a sour taste in the mouth, especially for a team that we thought was capable of getting a 1 seed. So we'll be really interested to see what Juwan Howard does with this adversity. Long season to go. You play in a league like the Big Ten, you have so many opportunities. It's ridiculous. So tons of time to go, but a rough early start. And then, of course, Illinois tonight gets blown out by Cincinnati. And that's after losing a game against Marquette. They had no business losing. They turned the ball over late, lose on a layup. So, yeah, Illinois, I said this earlier. Both their top assistants went to Kentucky. Adam Miller, out of nowhere, transfers to LSU. They had a lot of offseason head-scratching things. Still have a great roster, but I want to really understand what's going on in that locker room. I think this is deeper than what we're seeing on the court.
Yeah, and Kofi was back for this game today,
Exactly.
where they got crushed. And Joby, I got to ask you, you being our metrics guy here, you're looking at Illinois, and the bottom line, they're 14, even below my Scarlet Knights. And you look at those predictive metrics, they're top 3 in the BPI. They have the number 1 defense coming into tonight. These are all the numbers coming into today. Maybe that shows you that these predictive metrics just don't mean anything this early this season because they looked atrocious tonight.
And I think they were probably because of the predictive metrics are doing 2 things here. And Sagarin and KenPom both openly say, hey, the first 10 games, there's a preseason bias, et cetera. And the other thing is they do some KenPom and Sagarin, once again, take into account missing players. So the first loss doesn't matter. It's a half team. And you don't have tonight's loss being taken into account in terms of the metrics. But I mean, come on. They're not a top 10 team. Once they got that first loss, I don't care there's so many other teams worthy. It's not about punishing Illinois. It's about, so a team like, let's pick out BYU. A team like BYU doesn't deserve to be ahead of them, even though they've performed on the court, ahead of them, and there's no doubt on it. That's wrong, and so I would like to think the J&G, and this is the bias of this site and myself, you're going to see where a team sits. And Illinois most likely is not going to be 66 at the end of the year. There probably will be closer to 5-3-11 maybe. But right now, with the performance and looking at their resume, they are a 66 ranked team. They're not a top 10 team.
Griggs, one other team with a disappointing loss this week in this conference with Maryland, who after playing
Rutgers.
with
Sorry.
we're not even going to talk about what Rutgers did with their not only DePaul but then 0-4 Lafayette team tonight. No, Griggs, we're going to talk about Maryland and what they did at home to George Mason after playing with fire with George Washington last week.
Yeah, I actually, if you watch the George Mason game, and I was watching it from the other side, I thought we would talk about them when we got to the A-10 a little more. I was actually more impressed with Mason than I was disappointed in Maryland. That's not to say that I don't think Maryland should have won or could have won or, played their best game. But Mason's good. And that's the George Mason game. GW is not good. When you look up good in the dictionary, there's a picture of George Washington and it says not this. So, I mean, it was very surprising that Maryland – they just really have not, like a lot of other teams, made the kind of statements that we thought that we'd see out of the gate in these early season games and some of these exempt events. Not to jump to another team, but other than Purdue and Ohio State tonight, who's really answered the bell in this conference?
Well, Dorman, maybe it's teams like Indiana and Minnesota who are sitting there undefeated. Indiana picked up a decent win over St. John's in the Gavitt games.
Yeah.
They did. They looked great against St. John's and looked really solid again last night. Minnesota's unbeaten, like as you said, but an interesting game for both the Big Ten and the Big East, which we've been discussing tonight. Northwestern will tip it off in a few minutes against Providence. Another game, the Big Ten will go against the Big East, and that might tell us a little more about this Northwestern team because they have played probably the easiest 4 games you could ever find. They'll need to turn it up a notch or two if they want to beat Providence and really put a solid win on their resume.
Yeah. And Rocco, don't forget that Wisconsin actually picked up the win over A&M out of the Maui. They get, I believe that they get Houston tomorrow, correct?
They do. Yes.
So there's another good test for a Big Ten team.
It's a good test. It's probably going to be way too difficult of a test. I mean, Wisconsin, they got kind of owned in their own game when they hosted Providence last Monday. And, if you want to talk about a grinding team, I mean, Houston basically cooked Virginia in their own crock pot last week. So imagine what it's going to look like against Wisconsin. Hey, listen, congrats to the Badgers. Good win today, but I just don't think A&M's that great. And Houston's on a whole nother level. But you never know. They struggle with Hofstra. So anything can happen in Vegas.
Yeah, and we see the other games this week coming up here this week. Michigan State's in an event where they're going to be getting Loyola Chicago, and then what do they get? Auburn, UConn. That's the battle for Atlantis, I believe. Michigan State is in there, so we should know more about them. Michigan gets a little bit of a breather though for the next few days. The undefeated Iowa team, Joby, is going to be out of Virginia to start the ACC Big Ten Challenge next week.
Yeah, it should be. I think we're seeing 2 teams that aren't what they were last year by a long way. That's really what it comes. Iowa, we kind of knew that with Garza moving on, and we with Murphy, with Murphy, Hauser, Huff. It's not the same Virginia team. I'm looking at that wonderful, like Maryland, Richmond can be kind of fun, followed by Maryland, whether win or lose, Mississippi State, Louisville. That little quadrant is very intriguing to me. By the way, we mentioned the Terps. We're going to find out a lot more about the Terps, see if they're the GW Terps, as David pointed out, or are they or is Mason that good?
Let's keep things rolling here. Dorman, let me bring you back in as we jump over to your conference here, the Pac-12. You being an Arizona alum, you have been kind of enjoying the game against Michigan. Absolutely, we mentioned it a little bit already, but absolutely dominating 80-62 win by Arizona. ISC has proven that they're good. How good are they?
That was, even I didn't see that coming. I didn't, in my best vision of what that game was going to be, that turned out off the charts. Arizona blew them out. I mean, they got up 20 and rolled Michigan off the court. Arizona was getting everything they wanted offensively. The big guy down low, Kokolo, was amazing and really stopped any inside game Michigan had. And Arizona, with Terry and Kerr hitting the shots outside, and the defense was stifling. They were all over him. Arizona looked really, really good. Tommy Lloyd has this team believing in themselves. And what with the Sean Miller days, it was too slow. It was a grind, slow. When you have the athletes and the speed and the quickness that Arizona has, you want more possessions. You want to speed up that game. And Tommy Lloyd has instilled that game plan right away. And I really, really think it's to our advantage, to Arizona's advantage. And you saw what it did last night to Michigan. Michigan couldn't get anything going. They couldn't get a run going. Everything Arizona wanted, they were getting. And I'm with you, Chad. I did not see this coming. Arizona looks good.
Yeah, and Rocco, I got to bring you back in here. No matter how, I mean, Arizona looks really good. UCLA has already beat Villanova. USC and Oregon have looked decent so far as well. But the bottom of the Pac-12 is looking maybe beyond those 3 or 4 teams really bad. We liked Arizona State heading into the season. They lose to San Diego State. We thought Oregon State, an NCAA tournament team last year, losing at home to Samford and Princeton. The bottom of this conference is problems still, doesn't it?
It's a problem. In fact, Sunday night I sent a text out. I did a quick Pac-12 power rating, and I had 1 through 7. I thought was pretty clear. 8 through 12 is just like, how could you even rank them? They're all have so many problems. When you go from Cal to UW to the Beavs to the Buffs to Stanford, even those 5 teams are really going through some serious issues. Colorado barely struggled, survived to beat Brown today. They had to go to OT to beat Duquesne. Clearly not the same Colorado team as last year early on. Stanford also going through struggles. They went to Baylor. Baylor had a big injury with Flagler out. Didn't matter. Stanford was blown out in the first 3 minutes of the game. Obviously, you mentioned what happened with the Beavs. We know about Cal and UW to a big extent. But I will say the positive side, Utah under Craig Smith, didn't take him long to get guys like Carlson and Riley Batten going in his system. Remember at Utah State, they had Kada down low, one of the best rim protectors in the country. They basically replicated that already in Salt Lake City, off to a nice 5-0 start. They got themselves into a tournament that was manageable, where they just played Boston College and Tulsa. Doesn't look like much on the outside, but I've watched a lot of them already, and I'm very impressed. Interested to see what they do against BYU in the big rivalry game on Saturday night.
It's been a big.
Trust me, the win over Tulsa will look better than the win over Boston College.
It already does, I think.
Speaking of big rivalries, though, Grace, we saw the largest margin ever in one of our favorite rivalries, only 8 miles apart between Washington State and Idaho, 109-61 on the road. Washington State, I mentioned in the preseason podcast, this was my dark horse team. 4-0 already.
They are, and you did, and they've looked good. Now, I know that they've gone to the pastry, well, with the exception of the Idaho game. They've gone to the pastry cart a little bit, but they've certainly looked the part. And when they do get a chance to play a notable opponent, I kind of like them. I'm starting to be with you more and more on this Wazoo team.
They're up they're up almost over 20 points on Winthrop in the first half as we record this now also.
And again, Winthrop, probably not a team that is going to be on the border in the bubble, but they're blowing them out the way that you would expect a tournament caliber team to blow them out. And when you look at Washington, Cal, like Oregon State, when you look at, there's a lot of low hanging fruit in this league for Wazoo to get their win total up, but there's enough chances for them to get the quality wins they need. I think that it's setting up for them to have a solid path to being on the bubble or inside of it. I'm with you. I'm in on Wazoo.
Joby,
How
I've got
far
the
apart are Washington State and Eastern Washington? Are we seeing another 8 mile?
Oh no, those are nowhere. Are those two that close? Wazoo and Idaho are 8 miles apart, and they've never met in the NCAA tournament.
Those are facts.
Yeah.
Joby, there's the upcoming schedule for this conference. Obviously, the highlight game is going to be
Tomorrow-
Tuesday night's UCLA Gonzaga
night.
game.
God, what an awesome game tomorrow night. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, it's 1 versus 2, rightfully so. I mean, it is a great showdown, especially I'm going to like to see how, the whole flow. You got players back like Timmy and Juzang. It's going to be a preview of either the regional final out west or Final Four. I mean, that's how cool this game is, and it's so great that we get to see it in the preseason. This is the sort of thing that you might not see, except if it's a conference situation in college football, for instance.
A little bit interesting. This is part of an event. Both teams are playing tonight, so they're both, without just one day after a game they play each other. UCLA is crushing Bellarmine as we record this, and Gonzaga plays Central Michigan later this evening. So a little bit interesting that they each have to play the day before they play each other. So we'll see if that factors
I
in
like
at all.
how they set up that bracket. Well, I know it's not a bracket, but that they would have them meet in the finals rather than the semifinals.
Well, they didn't bracket it just in case something crazy happened, so they could guarantee that the game would happen. Griggs, though, the other huge game on the schedule here is, of course, is Saturday, BYU Utah.
Yeah, the Holy War, one of the most bitter rivalries, arguably the most bitter. I think there's one that is more bitter, but it's not that interesting because Missouri's not that good. It's still amazing, but it depends on how you define big. Is it as important nationally as Duke, North Carolina? No, it's not even a conference game anymore. But for those of you out west, are there two teams in college basketball that hate each other more than these two, as far as the fans go? I don't think there is.
No, it's hard to compare that, but yeah, you're right. You wouldn't be able to argue anything higher than the hate between these two. I would also say that, with the fans back this year, that this is a game where that is going to make a serious impact. The Huntsman Center will be crazier than we've seen any time in the recent few years under Larry Kustoviak. Craig Smith's team's undefeated. BYU just blew out Oregon. I mean, the hype for this is already starting in Utah, and we're still 5 days away. I mean, it's going to be nuts. That whole day, they're going to tailgate for this game.
Yeah. Did they play in football? I think
Yeah,
they
they
did.
did.
They did. Okay, because
They consistently did. Yeah.
Okay. Didn't they stop it for a while? Like, I know that they stopped the basketball game for a year or two because it was just getting too violent. Anyway, I love it.
We'll see how this weekend goes. Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Let's go over to let's head back east actually and head to the ACC. Joby, this being your team's conference here, as we get these ACC standings up here, and Virginia. Let's start with your team maybe here too. I did not look very good with Houston, but got the win tonight, albeit with a ton of struggled most of the way against what we think is a very bad Georgia team. Is there trouble? Is Tony Bennett on the hot seat?
Yeah, Tony Bennett is. It's flaming hot. Heck, with the firing of Dan Mullen, you never know how stupid fans can be. No, I mean, Virginia's not, as I hinted in the Iowa-Virginia game, for next week. Virginia right now does not look like a tournament team. Let's be honest here. But they're pieces. You all of a sudden see McCorkle make a shot. You see Milicic make a shot. Franklin scores 20. Scores a career high 23, I think, tonight. Gardner has put in points. The defense is still disjointed. It comes down to the fact that I have a feeling this team will rise and fall with Franklin's ability to hit shots, because right now Clark and Beekman are not consistent enough from the outside to provide that guard scoring. You need that outside shot threat. Franklin will get his looks, but Franklin is not as far from a consistent three-point shooter. If Franklin turns it up a notch, Virginia can beat anybody on a given day if the defense is hitting. I don't know how often that's going to occur though.
Yeah, and Dorman, when I look at this conference, it's kind of, maybe this is a 1-1A situation with the Big Ten in terms of disappointments, though. Overall, I mean, you're seeing way too much red here. You're seeing Syracuse losing at home to Colgate. You're seeing
Chad, let me
BC
stop.
losing to Rhode. Greg's, go ahead.
Are you classifying Syracuse losing at home to Colgate as a disappointment? I rather enjoyed that.
I think it's a disappointment for the conference. I think it's enjoyment for most of us. But I mean, I look at what I've seen so far. The conference, the team I like the best is Notre Dame because they've only played twice.
Oh,
I was going to pick up on that team.
Okay.
Exactly. Notre Dame has a very interesting game tonight late against St. Mary's.
Right.
That will go a long way in seeing where Notre Dame and some of the ACC really stacks up. Because St. Mary's is one of those teams that is looking for one of those at-large bids and a very solid West Coast conference. The winner of this game tonight, then probably, I'm going to assume Oregon's going to knock off Chaminade, has a great test. That'll be a great game tonight. The winner of this Notre Dame game gets Oregon. So I think we're really going to find out a lot about Notre Dame tonight and tomorrow night.
That's,
agreed.
Go ahead, Griggs. Yeah.
Oh, I was just agreeing with this point. I'm all in on that. And that is a big, I mean, we know this. If you're watching this, especially at this time of the year, you know this, but I'll say it anyway. Like, these are pivotal games, even though it's only the third week of the season. It's November 22nd, and that Notre Dame St. Mary's game is very important tonight.
It is. And Rocco,
Huge.
I also want to look at the two far right columns here, which are the AP and the coaches poll that came out today. You've got one top 25 team in the ACC. It's almost unheard of.
It is, but I think preseason, even if you had 3 or 4, like Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida State, in that 10 to 25 range, all of them except for Duke have been knocked off now, and North Carolina got knocked off twice, albeit to great teams. That's enough to get you out of the poll for a week. You look what Florida State's doing in the tournament. They're totally blasting. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say you take it one step further. Look at Joby's JNG column right here. You've got 2 NCAA tournament teams in this conference right now. Just Duke and Vodtech. But go ahead. I didn't cut you off.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's warranted. I mean, I had Notre Dame as a preseason turning team, and they haven't lost, so they're still there, but they didn't look good in either of their wins. Like you said earlier, the St. Mary's matchup is fascinating. They're basically mirror images of each other. They're very strong at a lot of the same things. It's going to be a really interesting strategy game if you watch the X's and O's on that. But yeah, like the conference itself, NC State, I mean, Manny Bates is out for the year. They're in trouble. I can't see them getting to the tournament. Louisville, I mean, lost at home to Furman. They've bounced back a little bit since. I have no idea where they're heading. Clemson looked good for a minute. Then they Clemsoned themselves and blew the West Virginia game with too many men on the court. I mean, just go down the list. Georgia Tech lost at home to a MAC team. There's a lot of early issues, but over the course of time, there's enough good coaches. You would imagine 5 or 6 of them will get it figured out.
Yeah, and Griggs,
But the issue
Joey, go
is,
ahead.
and this is the perfect example, Chad,
Yeah.
and it's what you're hinting at. Looking at those J&G numbers, all right, once maybe, Virginia gets their defense underway and gets their feet under them, Hubert Davis gets his stuff together at North Carolina, Louisville, with Cronin. The fact of the matter is, if they get it together and we're now into conference season, they might be dramatically improved teams. The metrics are not going to be there unless they knock off Duke. I mean, seriously.
And I got the upcoming schedule, Griggs, and we've got the events going on, but the key game, maybe this should be the Gonzaga show, because after playing UCLA, oh, by the way, Friday night Gonzaga gets Duke also out there in Vegas.
Good time to be in Vegas. Is that where Tytel's on his way to?
No, he's actually going to. He was in Vegas. He was there for the Arizona Michigan game, but yeah, that's obviously the only game to really circle this week in this conference, I think.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt Pitt, the Stallings game.
Oh,
The Stallings Classic, and you are ignoring it. I'm just ashamed of you, Chad.
We'll be covering that under the radar,
Syracuse's
Joby.
Syracuse's
The
event is
radar.
fairly interesting, I think. Vautech Memphis. Yeah, there's a couple big ones here.
Tech Memphis is pretty big. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they could possibly have Xavier if they win that game. So that could be a real
Right.
interesting week for Vautech, actually.
And not to belabor the Virginia point, but if Providence does take care of business tonight, Virginia Providence could provide a very interesting window in that opportunity for both teams to get a win over what might be the loser, might be NIT bound. But at least it'll be a good metrics win, I think, for whoever gets that.
Miami Dayton, a game that nobody cares who wins. Let's move on to the Big 12 conference. Dorman,
Oh, brother.
Dorman, let me bring you back in here as we bring the Big 12 up. This is a conference that has been doing very, very well as well. Only 4 losses on the entire league so far.
Absolutely. Baylor looks good. We know they lost a lot, but Scott Drew is this team cooking again. I was up in the air on Iowa State. They've looked pretty solid. I know they haven't been tested, but 4 wins is 4 wins. Same thing with Texas Tech. Coach Beard left that. He left plenty of talent there. Let's see if they can cook anything up. Kansas is top few in the country. Oklahoma looked good in that tournament down south. Somewhere I think in one of the islands.
They lost to Utah State in the finals. So
in the finals, but Utah
Yeah.
State's not a bad loss. Utah State's a good club.
Yeah, we'll talk about them here in a minute.
Yeah, and I was pretty impressed with West Virginia. I know they took a loss in the semifinals. They came back in the consolation championship and beat Clemson. But I think West Virginia will work itself out and be a solid team. And Texas, we're going to learn more as they start to play some better competition. But I'm with you. This Big 12 is loaded. They got some really good teams. They're well coached. And I think a lot of these teams are going to be in the tournament.
Yeah, let me follow that with a question for the audience that I know the answer to. I think all of you know it because I ask it every week. Rocco, a bracket or a selection committee guessing expert, is with us. Tytel would be here. On the team sheets, when the committee's deliberating, at any point do they bring up if a game was a 3rd place game, a 5th place game, a 1st place game in these exempt events?
No, sir. And they also they look the exact same as any other neutral game. If you did a special event, for example.
I mean,
That's what I was getting at.
But the big difference is you're going to get a lesser opponent if you do lose in the earlier rounds. For example, West Virginia, by losing to Marquette, didn't get a matchup with the Bonnies. They got a matchup with Clemson instead.
What if you're loyal at Marymount and Mizzou upsets SMU, and then all of a sudden you get to play SMU?
That's happened. I remember it happened to.
Just kidding.
It happened to Monmouth one year. I remember thinking they would have been better off losing.
I've seen that a couple times. Yeah.
If there are
It's rare,
upsets,
though.
it could happen.
Yeah.
Joby, let me ask you about this Baylor team, though.
Mm.
I was watching the broadcast a little bit of the Stanford game, and they're talking about that this team may actually be better than last year.
I don't know about that.
I thought that was a stretch, but they've been very impressive.
Butler, I think losing Butler is such a key, for any team, such a elite guy who also happens to be a glue guy. But Baylor, I mean, I was like, it's going to be a good team. It's all. I left that Stanford game going, okay, well, maybe they could be making a trip to the Final Four after all. I mean, they really, it's already been said, but they really haven't missed a beat. I'm not going to say they're better than the national championship team, but man, even with different pieces and some the same, they really have at least jumped out. We're going to find out more from them because they're not shy on their out of conference scheduling often. And so let's, they're worthy of the praise. Most people had them in the bottom half of the top 10. Maybe you need to bump them up with the loss of Michigan's loss and Illinois' loss. Maybe you need to think about moving them up much quicker on the pollsters need to think about doing exactly that, moving them up a lot quicker.
And to Joby's point, because I completely agree, in a 1 week span in December, they're going to get Villanova and Oregon. They will be tested, and I think we're going to find out how good this Baylor team is.
We'll find out how good they are. Rocco, here's the upcoming schedule. Baylor also in their event here where they could be facing UConn
event.
potentially in the championship game.
Mm.
Kansas with their event should have a couple of easy early games, but a fascinating potential final on Sunday between Kansas and Alabama if we can get that game.
Oh yeah, and God, let us get that game.
Yeah, Kansas, Alabama, I mean, should happen. Kansas will get the winner of the mid-major battle between Drake and Belmont, which what a shame that they put them
Alabama
against
gets
each other.
the Drake Belmont winner, I
Oh,
believe.
excuse me, Alabama
Yeah,
gets
yeah,
okay.
Kansas gets the Dayton Miami.
No,
winner.
Rick Pitino
Oh,
has
Kansas
to
gets
say
the
about
easier-
that.
Kansas gets the easier draw then.
That
Yeah.
is the easier draw. Like,
Yeah, you got you have
well-
Iona in there too, a very, very good mid-major team.
actually, I'm going to be
Yeah.
rooting for them. Kansas and Alabama can play in the NCAA tournament.
Sorry, Rocco, would cut you off though. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you see Kansas, Alabama, I mean, we'll certainly learn a lot. I love the way Alabama's humming already. I mean, Alabama's already brought in, and I know we're not in the SEC yet, but they've already brought in like some of the upper echelon mid-major programs and already tested themselves. I think they're
Yeah.
more ready to win now than anybody in the field. So they have a big advantage, I think, just because of that.
One team, interestingly, that I'm not. Oh, I am seeing them with one game up there against Eastern Kentucky is West Virginia, who honestly have not been very impressed by so far. I just don't think that they've looked very good on the court. They only have one game this week, so they probably could use the practice time to get things straightened out there. 4-1, but,
Yeah.
but disappointing 4-1, I'd say.
And big
Great.
congratulations there if you're watching, Bob, on becoming the fourth winningest coach of all time. That's Chad Sherwood that just took a dump all over you.
No,
win.
he
That-
did pass Roy Williams. He's number 4, and he should probably make number 3 by the end of the season. So congratulations to
Yeah.
him. Definitely a Hall of Famer there.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to the SEC. And Joby, let me start with you as we come over here. And I don't know, maybe do we start with this Alabama team? They are 4-0 and looking pretty good so far.
No, yeah, and we talked about it. What Nate Oates has been doing and the uniqueness of losing someone like Jones. How does the team respond? And just as someone on the panel said, Shackelford has done a pretty good job coming in and suiting up and showing an all SEC type level of play early. So this Alabama team they are back. They are, this is going to be a team to reckon with. And probably, I mean, Kentucky, you got to seriously consider too, but they, along with Kentucky, I would say are early co-favorites, even in what is a strong, deep conference, as we'll talk about on this podcast going forward.
Dorman, is he forgetting about Arkansas and Tennessee if he's just saying those two teams?
Yeah, no, that's my point. Is you have it, and Auburn, Pearl. I mean, this is a deep conference, but I think Alabama and Kentucky are the two you got to look at first and foremost.
I agree. I'm real high on this Alabama team. I'm right with Joby, and they got a crazy schedule coming up. I believe they do have Iona, as good as anyone in the middle areas there. Then I believe it's Gonzaga, Houston, and Memphis. So they are going to be tested before they get to this tough SEC schedule. But with Joby, Bama is good, and but also Arkansas. Do not sleep on Arkansas. Musselman has the pieces in place. He's got his system going. They're going to be up tempo. They're going to play rock solid D, and they're going to make you earn it. This conference is looking like it could be better than the Big Ten and the ACC. And if we said that 2-3 weeks ago, people probably would have thought we were crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Rocco, you take the next step down. You still look at teams that are getting top 25 votes in LSU, Mississippi State, even Florida, who's in the top 25.
Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, there's great depth in the league. I think there's tremendous head coaching in the league. I mean, across the board, there's probably going to be a few guys getting fired this year that are elite coaches in their careers. So it's going to be brutal once we get into conference play. I do think Mississippi State's been able to hold serve, play very well against teams that are inferior, blowing them right off the court. I know Montana went down there, lost by 40. So Bulldogs doing what they got to do early. Now we'll find out what they can do when they themselves get to a Caribbean event and play Louisville. I believe Richmond and Maryland are on the other side. So those are going to be two good games to learn more about the Bulldogs. I think you look at Ole Miss, wasn't too impressed with their showing in Charleston. Got beat up by Boise there on the last day. I think they finished in sixth. You know, I don't know if Kermit's got the team this year. They have a lot to figure out, but Auburn's solid, really nice roster, and LSU. You know, I think they blew out Belmont. I don't know if that's final yet.
It's not on the screen there, but it did go final. It's a 30-point win over a pretty good
That's
Belmont
huge.
team.
Yeah, that is.
So that's the thing about LSU. Like LSU can just out athlete a lot of these teams. Like Liberty came down there. They were tied with a few minutes to go and they ended up winning by 16 late. So they just have typical Will Wade team, super athletic, can blow teams out of the gym. But when they get into these half court games later on in the year, I don't know. I think LSU could struggle at that point.
Yeah, LSU gave themselves an easy tournament. They would play Penn State and the winner of Wake Forest and Oregon State. So they should be racking up some big wins here this week.
Had in the win column.
But yeah, that's it. Anything else that we were looking for really to here as we look through the rest of the schedule coming up this week, Griggs?
The rest of the schedule this week, not so much. Wofford and
other games we discussed Alabama already, but yeah.
I just wanted to make the real quick point with the football rivalry weekend. Auburn and Alabama's football game is not nearly as compelling as the basketball game will be.
And I'll add to that. Auburn basketball is going to be in the Atlantis. They play UConn right off the bat, but I think it's not that big of a gap between UConn and Auburn. And one of the things that Pearl has this year, he's got about 10 deep, and that is phenomenal for a 3-day event. If they somehow can beat UConn, they're going to be in great shape to be in position.
They're both ranked. Are people under the impression that those two are far apart? I would have.
I hope not. I hope.
Yeah,
not. I heard earlier UConn was already in the final, and I just want to make sure that's
not at all.
Not a shooter. Okay, we're on the same page then.
Auburn's got UConn. Auburn then has to play the winner of that Auburn UConn game plays the winner of Michigan State Loyola Chicago game. That is going to be a great event. Alabama, we were given a bye to the final, but they've got to play Iona, Rick Pitino's squad, and then they got to play that Belmont or Drake. Drake, a very good team out of the Missouri Valley.
Yeah,
so
Drake is very good.
Yes,
and maybe I missed it. We didn't even bring up Tennessee. Tennessee's got elite 8 type talent, and unless I missed someone on the panel say it, Tennessee's loaded. I mean, this conference is great.
This is kind of backwards from where we were about 5 or 6 years ago when the SEC was awful, and the ACC had like 30 teams they're putting against it. Joby, let's jump over. We've talked about them a couple of times already. Let's talk a little bit more about the number 1 team in the nation, the Zags, who not so much of what they have done this past week, who they beat up on Bellarmine, and I think that they're.
I mean, it's all about what's happening in front of them. Yeah. We kind of previewed the UCLA game for tomorrow night. If you're out there, watch it. You know that is like I said, a preview of either the West Regional Final or the Final Four. And Timmy has been. I didn't know if Timmy could actually be the total focal point and continue it without, Kispert nailing from the outside. And, I thought, the teams will just stack it up inside. But obviously with the freshman coming in, even the freshman, the 6'11" freshman who can nail threes, along with, that is actually played perfectly to what is now a very experienced player that, probably should be wearing a Duke uniform, to be honest, given how the public views him. But this Gonzaga team is ready to do exactly what they did last year, which is make a deep run. I hope that they show themselves well out of conference just because of the lack of depth in the WCC. But as I will hand off as a segue to others, they are not alone at being at the top and being a national power out of the WCC.
They are, but I mean, Dorman, let me ask you first about BYU. Unbelievable what they did to Oregon. That's almost a full week ago now, but this BYU team has looked so good so far as well.
Absolutely. Oregon was never really in the game. BYU got hot early, and Oregon never had an answer to anything BYU was doing that night. And really well coached. They play together. They pass the ball beautifully. This conference, maybe some people say I'm crazy. Could the West Coast Conference get 4 teams in the tournament?
You kind of stole exactly what I wanted to ask Rocco actually by saying that, because beyond the Zags at BYU, St. Mary's undefeated. We'll find out a lot more about them later this evening after we finish recording this. How about the Dons, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chad, we got to do this because you have the capability. We got to do it at least once a show. Pull up the profile
For San Francisco. All right.
Yes, pull up the Don.
I'll pull them up, and
There's
Rocco, I ask you about them.
Not a ton yet, because Nevada's 1-4 after getting boat raced by South Dakota State a couple hours ago. Davidson win is okay, but we'll find out a lot this week. They're in the Las Vegas Invitational, not the fanciest Las Vegas event out there. There's obviously a ton to look at in Vegas these last 10 days or next 10 days. They'll get Towson in the opener, but watch out the other side of the bracket. One of the other best, probably under the radar teams out there is UAB. And as long as UAB can beat New Mexico, not an easy game, but as long as that comes together, that should be a great, great test. UAB a little disappointed in their muck it up loss to South Carolina last week. But outside of that, they can get out and run. San Francisco is going to try to do the same thing to them if that matchup happens. Slow it down, half-court game, keep it in the 60s. If they do that, I think the Dons will win that game. Then you look at the rest of their schedule. They got most of the big ones at home from there. Fresno's decent. Grand Canyon will be kind of a road game, and Arizona State on back-to-back days. They can survive that test. You keep in mind, the WCC plays more non-conference games than any other league. 15, it's only a 16-game league schedule. So lots of opportunities out there. The Dons and the Gales took opposite approaches. The Dons decided to get most home games, most winnable games. It's paying off already. We'll see what it looks like later. I think this is a good case study for us. The Gales are going to have tons of tests. They got the Maui. They'll go to Utah State. They'll go to Colorado State. They have really tough teams coming into Moraga. So, yeah, it's an interesting case study.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just real quick, looking at the San Francisco schedule, the conference schedule we don't have the full double round robin. They do have all 3 big teams, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, BYU, all on the road in there. So while it's tougher, it also gives you the chance for that big win.
Big win.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think they're going to need those. And my question, on the court, I'm really impressed with the progress this program's made. And I think that as far as the caliber of team they are, bubble-ish, maybe even a little better. But when you know this, when we do this every year, we're going to do it this year. When you're pouring over a team's credentials, they didn't really give themselves too many games that are going to jump off the page here. When you're trying to make a case that isn't, oh man, these quad 1 wins or this big win, did they underschedule here a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, how much that's by design or not. One of the teams I looked at a lot over the offseason from last year was Drake, a team that really didn't have any good non-conference games, but they blew everybody's imaginations away with the 20-0 start and being on SportsCenter with dunks every night, and eventually got one of the last bids because their metrics on the predictive side was so great that you can kind of ignore the resume. So today's day and age with the 5 different rating systems on the team sheet, I think certain staff, San Francisco maybe being one of them here, looking at this as, hey, let's just stack up the wins. Let's not play anybody in the 300s now, because all these teams are under, inside the 250 or so. And we'll stay right about where we need to be if we take care of business.
We need to. I will caution about last year was not exactly a typical normal year. Right. But I do think Drake was well deserving of that bid.
Absolutely, and I agree. So if you deserve, hopefully there's enough data to show it regardless of your strength of schedule.
Yeah,
I have the upcoming schedule. Go ahead, Dorman.
Like to your guys' point, I couldn't agree more. San Francisco, between the BYU, the Gonzaga, and the St. Mary's game, they're gonna need, with that schedule out of conference, they might need 2 of those wins to keep their hopes alive.
I think one of those road wins would get you there, and you obviously get the home games as well.
Yeah, but if they go 0-6 in those,
that's going to be a problem. Yeah,
trouble.
The upcoming schedule for the West Coast Conference.
By the way.
Honestly, we've probably already discussed all of these West Coast Conference games, and note St. Mary's being in the Maui and the Gonzaga's two big games and the holy war between BYU and Utah. So let's just jump over to the American instead.
Well, real
oh,
quick,
sorry, go
Chad,
ahead.
I
Yeah.
do got to mention Santa Clara. They've looked
Okay.
outstanding, and they're undefeated playing TCU tonight. Both undefeated teams, somewhat unproven on both ends. Unfortunately, Santa Clara, Vronkic, their star, has mono and won't be going tonight. But Santa Clara, I mean, talk about a team. I covered both last week. So Santa Clara is a team super big. Their guards are big, and they move the ball, play European style basketball. They get great looks every possession. I mean, I was super impressed. I think they have staying power.
All right. So that could be the fifth team that at least if nothing else provides quality wins for other teams should they get a few non-conference wins.
I think so.
Let's jump over the American though. And Griggs, obviously this conference so far has been about Houston and Memphis, but maybe we saw tonight with Cincinnati over Illinois. We do have a third team making some serious noise here.
Well, they went from making very, very little, rustling noises to making a big explosive noise tonight. This might be the biggest surprise of the year in the sense that, okay, had Cincinnati won anyway, I think it would have been unexpected. When Cincinnati fell behind by 15 and won by 20, that is ridiculous. And this was an Illinois team that was back at full strength that came out. You can't say they weren't ready. Illinois did not overlook them. They jumped on them real quick, and then Cincinnati made adjustments. Phenomenal bench coaching, phenomenal effort. I was just amazed. They outscored them by 35 points in the final 30 minutes. And Cincinnati, who we thought was going to go through kind of a rough transition before they got on track tonight, looked amazingly good.
They really did. The other team that's looked really good, Joby, has been Houston. I know you don't really want to talk about what they did to Virginia, but even after that, they crushed Butler today also.
Exactly. They're doing, Memphis, I think, is the shiny object here because of all the recruits and, Penny and all that stuff. But the favorite in this conference is the Houston Cougars. I mean, we are ignoring a Final Four team from last year, it seems like, due to the shiny object on the Mississippi. The fact of the matter is this team has the same grit, toughness. They do it in a boring way. They go at you with waves. You're not going to get an offensive rebound against them. It is that sort of just consistent play that you see out of Houston that I think builds and will allow them to not slip up a whole lot in conference play. The gaudy record they produced last year heading into the tournament, I think they can replicate that again and find themselves once again, not just cracking a protective seed, but getting that 2-3, and dare I say, if they are, have just a really gaudy record, a 1.
Can we pull up a profile real quick, Chad?
Okay.
Cincinnati.
Okay, let's take a look at Cincinnati. I'm going to pull them up.
And maybe Houston as well, since we can look
Houston,
into it
go
at the
ahead.
same time.
Yeah.
We'll compare Cincinnati.
Houston
Houston, but
has fun.
Cincinnati is loading here on the left-hand side. Houston's coming in on the right, and there they are. So Cincinnati has that right now is a huge tier 1 win, and Houston has beaten Butler and Virginia. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I was looking at is their next 4 games look winnable. And then they go into a game that in the preseason.
They could be playing Arkansas tomorrow, and you're saying that.
Okay. Good point. Okay, they might be. Yeah, they probably will. But yeah, if they play,
it's a huge game. So they play Arkansas. But I'm trying to get an update. Arkansas right now is crushing K-State at the half, so there should be Arkansas tomorrow.
Yeah, I forgot that that was an event. Of course, it was. The floor was pink, by the way. I don't know what that was about. But anyway, if Stalik is watching, and I know he is, I know you are having a hard time making it. But if you're going to be on one show this year, it's got to be the one that we do after December 11th.
Okay,
So we talk about Houston, Alabama. That'd be cool.
I thought we were talking about Missouri and Kansas on December 11th. But
yeah, because that game is on track to feature 2 ranked teams who were unranked at the beginning of the year, and it's the Stalika shootout.
Let's go back to the standings real quick. I got the upcoming schedule here for this week. Obviously, since Cincinnati, Arkansas, which should be happening on Tuesday night. Beyond that, I don't know that there's much else other than maybe the Memphis Vautech and the Memphis Xavier games are the other two. I guess here we got a circle for this week. Those are the, you know,
Yeah.
Those are
Kind of
coming up. But Chad, if I could jump in, Central Florida
Mhm.
hasn't beaten anyone great. They do have a win against Miami, but Johnny
Okay.
Dawkins has a solid team. And coming up, they're going to get Oklahoma, they're going to get Auburn, and I also believe they got Michigan in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So Central Florida we're going to find out if they are going to be a contender come March in the next couple of weeks, because they got some opportunities.
I'll tell you, yeah, I think I watched, was it their, it wasn't the Miami game. I think I watched the Jacksonville game and they just did not look good in it. I know they're 4-0. I'm not sold on Central Florida. They got, you know, they win these next two, Oklahoma and at Auburn. We could talk about Central Florida. I'm not there yet on them.
Even split.
Even split. Yeah, win one of them. Win one of them, and let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit here. But let's jump over to the Atlantic 10 with Rocco. How about the Bonnies doing what we kind of said they need to do, and which I feel they may not do, but they did. They went out and they won their event, despite all that red on the screen there for the rest of the conference. There they are, 5-0.
Bonnies are 5-0 one way or another. I mean, I think 3 of those wins. I'm going back to last Sunday when they were really in a tough battle with Canisius, and then the opening game with Boise last week. That thing was like tied with 3 minutes to go. The Clemson one came down to the last possession, and then Marquette, they blew them out. But credit to the Bonnies, they did what they had to do. They were big in the crucial moments, which is a sign of a really good team. And how about the fans? They just took over. I was reading a lot of articles about it. I don't know if you guys saw, but the fans took over Charleston. They basically made those into home games. I mean, there was a Clemson writer talking about Clemson playing in their home state and being in a road game against St. Bonaventure, because there was so many Bonnies fans partying all weekend and all week. So kudos to them. And this is kind of like their dream season where they got the 5 seniors. You can feel the story coming. Some of those struggles, though, I wanted to call those out because if they hit bumps in the road, it's not like we didn't see warning signs.
Yeah,
Do you think this is like a Dayton from a few years ago, Rocco?
It's got the same, I think everybody wants that for the storyline and the narrative, but they don't have Obi Toppin. So that's a problem, right? They're a really good story and they can definitely get to the top 20 or so, but I don't see them getting in the top 10 or top 5.
You don't? I see them
I
getting.
Personally don't. No.
Oh, okay, I see them getting ranked that high.
Maybe
I think
ranked, but that's
but
The
not
NSC
on the
list.
seed
They're not
list.
going to pile up the
No,
wins to get a high protect. Like I was talking about with Houston, they're not going to reach the heights of what I said Houston could, precisely because they won't have the opportunities for the most part to be able to do so.
and the fact that this conference wasn't that great heading into the season and has been playing down on the season doesn't help. In fact, George Mason's the other team. We already mentioned them. We were talking about Maryland earlier. It's the only team that just showed me anything this conference so far.
I'm with you, Chad, and I am a big fan of A10 hoops, and this is not their finest year. George Mason does look solid. The Maryland game, they're going to stack up a lot of wins because, like we said, this conference is down. But St. Bonaventure, to me, this is their conference. This is their year. Everything stacks up for them. They have a very interesting game coming up early December against Connecticut. That will say a lot to me. If St. Bonnie can win that game, the Bonnies will be ranked in the top 10.
Yeah, it's an interesting week for Mason. I think they're in Sioux Falls for this Rocco. They're playing your Washington Huskies tonight, then Nevada, and then South Dakota State 3 straight days.
Correct. And we have a score update. George Mason trails 29-20 to Washington. What a surprising start that is. But they'll get George Mason gets Nevada tomorrow and South Dakota State Wednesday. South Dakota State's probably the team to beat. I mean, they look phenomenal.
Yeah.
They look phenomenal. I mean,
they're good.
One of the best offenses in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the show where we're talking about them, but they are absolutely good.
Yeah, the other games to watch. Richmond, who we did like heading into the season, has a really interesting week with Maryland, and then either Louisville or Mississippi State in their event, so they could try to get things turned around there. And we've got to give a shout out, Griggs, to the Fordham Rams, who blew out what we thought was a decent Akron team out of the MAC tonight to move on to the semifinals. They'll be playing looks like they'll be playing Delaware in the semifinals of the Gulf Coast Showcase tomorrow. So
in our research shows that we're not sure if Fordham has ever blown out, it has ever moved on to the semifinals of anything, the A10, the anything. But yeah, big surprise here. Mason kind of up, they lost to James Madison. I don't know if that's a hiccup or if Maryland's terrible or what, but I'm with you. I think it's a one horse race with a solid second horse that'll finish in the money, and then it's just kind of downhill after that.
Not to completely dismiss it, but I do think James Madison wins the Colonial and wins it handily. But still, Mason needs to win that.
It's still James Madison will not be the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
because they're ineligible
if JMU is not inside the bubble, they will not go.
Yeah, they're not eligible for the Colonial automatic bid this year, so they're not eligible for an automatic bid. Let's
Play for their lives.
one last conference to get to quickly here, over to the Mountain West, where congrats actually to start off to Colorado State, who was down huge to Northeastern in the first half. A game that's not even on the screen yet. They came all the way back. Won the Paradise Jam Championship while we've been on the air recording this. They're now 6-0. And Rocco, we talked about this heading into the season. They've got a fairly weak non-conference schedule. They need to win all these games.
Yeah, I mean, the tournament didn't pan out the way they probably had hoped. I think they wanted to play Colorado in the final, and Colorado lost to this team earlier in the tourney. So Colorado State gets it done, though. I mean, really sketchy first half. They pull it out late. They also, had struggles with Bradley in the first round. So there's some warning signs, but really, really strong team. David Roddy is a joy to watch, as we've discussed. And keep your eye on December, because in December, they're going to host St. Mary's on a Saturday. The next Saturday, they're going to get down to Fort Worth Dickies Arena and play Mississippi State.
That's a good,
And then they'll do another neutral with Tulsa. And then 3 days later, they're going to play in Birmingham against Alabama. So they're going to get two SEC teams in St. Mary's, essentially. Really big test there for the Rams. And the top of the MWC, we still are trying to figure that all out. I'm really curious to see what Fresno State does against Santa Clara on Wednesday and even beyond. I'm super intrigued by them. I think UNLV showed a lot of fight this week, even though they lost twice. Wyoming's still undefeated. Boise State, won those last two games and took St. Bonaventure to the wire. So there's a lot of good stories. Plus, not to blow the whole conference, but Utah State just won 4 games on the East Coast.
That's the team I pulled up on the right there, Rocco. I was waiting for you to get to them, but Dormer, let me ask you real quickly. Utah State started the season by losing a home game to UC Davis. I wrote them off, and here they are. They beat that Richmond team. They've beaten Oklahoma. They beat we thought was a very good New Mexico State team. What about them? Maybe that was just a fluke on opening night.
I'm thinking it was, because I was with you, Chad, and I even saw again. They looked terrible against Cal Davis, and then they looked every bit the part when they took Oklahoma and Richmond down. So if that one game, I'm tending to agree with you that UC Davis was a one-off, and this team is solid because Oklahoma, Richmond, and New Mexico State are good. They're good.
Yeah.
I know Richmond needs to get it going, but they've got upperclassmen. This is supposed to be their year and their story. New Mexico State out of the WAC. It's their conference. They'll be in the tournament. Oklahoma, Moser is going to get this program going. So I don't necessarily think they're top of the Big 12, but Utah State's got a good team.
Yeah, and the interesting schedule. They got games at home against St. Mary's, at BYU, a neutral court game against Iowa, so they'll have a few chances there as well. But Joby, real quick, the upcoming schedule in the Mountain West should be coming up on the screen here as we look at it. I'm not certain that, other than the Denver Air Force Front Range game on Wednesday, what else we're really circling.
San Diego State, USC,
Okay.
if it happens.
Yeah. Okay.
Is something. I mean, that's San Diego State, looming around. If they're going to make that run back, to an at-large worthy, they need wins. Like they don't need a win against St. Joe's. They need a win against USC if that game comes to fruition. I think it will. They should be able to take care of business against Georgetown. So we'll see.
I guess on that note,
but you're not comparing that to the Front Range game, are you?
Hastings College versus Wyoming.
Let's go ahead and pull this down on that note then. I want to go through each of you for any other final thoughts on the evening. That does complete all the teams. And Joby, you're on my screen, so why don't I start with you?
Sure. No, it's almost a public, a public awareness note. The J&G is up, fully running, is now playing off itself. So you're seeing teams that you might not otherwise see, up there. The ones that have popped out are teams with big wins right now: Purdue, Duke, Gonzaga, Kansas, UCLA, Seton Hall. Those Baylor. They're the ones who have Arizona. That's who makes up your top 8. But it's interesting right now. Okay, what under the radar teams could pop? Or is it going to be a bunch of? Is it going to be a bunch of big conference teams that go? Well, with the ACC imploding, the Big Ten not doing what they wanted to, maybe there will be some bids for that, Chattanooga, for that, MAC team that goes well. Maybe the Mountain West will supply some more people. Loyola Chicago, if they stumble in the Missouri Valley after a strong season. It'll be very interesting to see what the domino effect of the lack of strength of some of the anticipated bids, because right now, I think the consensus for us was 7 or 8 ACC bids. I don't see how even if the ACC completely turns around the Big Ten challenge, I don't see how they can still produce that many. So,
and they're not going to pick up the quality wins of the Big Ten. They're not going to get the quality wins of the Big Ten challenge because the Big Ten sticks.
And that's the thing, is the Big Ten, it's like, it's sort of, two drunks standing up, leaning up against each other. Who's going to fall first,
It's somebody asked on Twitter earlier tonight what team they even look forward to seeing in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. My answer was Purdue, but only if they play their bench team. So I don't know what team I want to see in that challenge. But Dorman, how about you? Any other final thoughts?
When we get to March and the committee gets in that room, we know those last spots are like, they're separating hairs. It's very difficult. These games this week and the next 2 weeks mean so much, because these out-of-conference games and these exempt tournaments where you have chances with these teams out of the power conference to put a win on your resume, or 2 or 3, is so big, because the team you might be chalked up against in that committee room might have failed this week and lost a game or 2 they shouldn't have. This week is so important for the teams out of the power conferences to make sure you get these victories on your resume.
Absolutely, it is. Rocco.
Yeah, Chad, 2 quick thoughts. So Battle for Atlantis, we talked a lot about it. The other side of the bracket has Baylor versus ASU and Syracuse VCU. So it almost on paper looks like a hall pass for Baylor to get to the final. But ASU scrappy, they lost by 2 to a very tough San Diego State team, and they lost on a 3-quarter court shot. I'd be very interested to see if they can hang around.
To who? To who?
To River.
Okay, just want to make sure. Wait, what's the Kansas?
Nothing wrong with losing to the Highlanders. The Huskies did it last year. It's okay. So anyway, ASU, like a team that I was high on. We'll see how they perform. Syracuse VCU already with some disappointing losses. Obviously Syracuse with those shooters. I mean, are they going to make noise? It seems like anytime you don't expect anything from Syracuse, that's when they come up and beat everybody. So who knows? Maybe they cut down the nets there if they're allowed to cut down nets. I'm not sure. Last thought, Arizona, obviously amazing last night. But I think Michigan and any style of team that plays like Michigan, where they want to get up and down, are going to run into big trouble against Arizona. That's exactly the way Tommy Lloyd wants to play. I think what Wichita did the day before, which was scrappy and a lot of different looks defensively, half-court game, eventually got that thing to overtime, could have beat Arizona. We had a whole different taste in our mouth after that game than we did after the Michigan game. So again, college basketball, it's all about matchups. It's all about strategy. It's all about game plans. And anybody within reason can beat anybody with the right, game plan and styles. And that's why it's so awesome.
Yep. And these games, this whole week is so great. And by the way, I didn't mention earlier, if you're looking for all the brackets for these tournaments, they are right up top there, the in-season tournaments tab. You can actually also watch our podcast we did a couple of weeks ago where we previewed all these events. But with Thanksgiving coming up, Griggs, I know there's something that you wanted to share with everybody to finish out our show here. Am I correct?
Yes, and again, it's a big week of college basketball. You touched on it just now. You touched on it earlier with so many games. It's the busiest week of the year. In a lot of ways, it's the most pivotal week of the year. It's the week that things start to take shape. Teams start to emerge. Under the radar teams and teams from smaller conferences can get bids for themselves. But for whatever reason, it's also a time where you're expected to see family and love. I never understood that. Like, I mean, I love the food and I love the basketball and, love drinking, but it's an issue because sometimes it can be hard to get out of Thanksgiving. So what we have here, in my final thought, it's just ways to get out of Thanksgiving so you can watch basketball. And this is like, I've done all of these and I've had various amounts of success, but I tell you, they do work. So here's number one. Ask the question, why did you vote for that idiot? Like at the family gathering, just pop that out. What's so beautiful about this is that it doesn't matter who the people voted for. It's just, you are guaranteed to create a ruckus. It will end Thanksgiving and then you can go home and watch basketball. Another thing you can try right here is show up with food from a drive-through. Now, the thing about this is whoever is cooking the meal is probably going all out on it, and they're probably a little bit resentful that they're the ones that started cooking it. So if you show up with your own food from like a McDonald's or whatever and just say, this is what I prefer, it could ruin Thanksgiving, and then you can go watch basketball. What was number 3? I wrote these earlier, but forgot what the... Oh yeah. Tell somebody like an uncle, aunt, a cousin, a brother, sister, that their kids are all right, but they're still not as good as yours. It's guaranteed to have a positive impact. Like this will get you out of Thanksgiving. Number 4, I think this is similar to hit on your in-laws. Like if you start hitting on your in-laws, this is guaranteed to work. Number 3 may not work. Number 2 probably will work, not necessarily. And then number 4 will work. And then the best way to do it is just say you can't stay long because you have dinner reservations, that you have to go eat.
Okay. Dave, I think there's one more here also.
There's one more. Okay, I thought there was only 5. What is the last one? Oh yeah, just don't show up. Just stay home and watch basketball. All right. So you know what it is, and these are some tips. This is a public service announcement. We want to make sure that you get to see all the games.
I guess on that note, I do want to thank everyone for joining us. Wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I'll leave the picture up there even as we sign off here. But on behalf of everyone below me here, I see got David Dorman, Joby Fortson, Rocco Miller from Bractier.org, David Griggs. Enjoy your turkey dinner. Don't follow any of David's advice, and we will.
It works. It does work.
On that note, I do want to thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you again real soon.